coming out. It's such a cold night and we seem to have snow. But anyway, we're nice and snug in here. So I hope you're all sitting comfortably, and I'd like you all to welcome Sophie. We've been waiting eagerly for her since November. I know that a lot of you have read the book, Kind of Cruel, and Sophie is going to talk about a lot of the background of the book, and she'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have about it or about any of her work. She also has written lots of poetry. I'm sure some of you have read that. And at the end, I know I put up posters with the winner of Premier Short Stories, but I'll just tell you a little bit about that as well. So if you'd all put your hands together, please, for Sophie.
Thank you. Oh, yes, it is working, isn't it? Weird microphone. Right. So I was going to say, I hope nobody's actually been sitting here since November. You'd be very cross by now. Yes, sorry about November. I was iller than I've ever been. I had like proper flu, and moving wasn't a possibility, let alone going to an airport. Well, it's lovely to be here, finally, and what I thought I would do, which is exactly what I would have done in November, so nothing has changed. I thought I'd tell you a bit of sort of the gossip behind the book, because that's always what I want to know. You know, you can pick up a book and look at the blurb and see what the plot's about, but you need an author to tell you what was it that made that particular author want to write that particular book, and that's what I always wonder. And it's always, when you find out the answer to that question, it's never what you think it's going to be. It's usually something quite weird, and in my case, it's usually something very weird. You know, I might, because I, you know, in a previous life was Eminem, I might actually hold the microphone. Yeah. So, what normally happens with my books is, I'll have an idea either for the opening mystery, or for a brilliant twist or solution to a mystery. So I'll start with either the beginning or the end, and it will just occur to me out of nowhere, or something will happen and something will occur to me. And it's always the beginning or the end. It's never something from the middle, weirdly. In the case of Kind of Cruel, I was giving a paper at a conference in Oxford. It was a kind of academic conference about crime writing, where they invited writers to talk about not their own books. This was the sort of unusual feature of this conference. Every crime writer had to give a sort of paper about some aspect of crime fiction. And I chose to give my paper on the concept of sort of implausibility, which is one of the many bees in my bonnet. I noticed that in crime fiction sort of reviewing, there's a tendency for people to be really unimaginative and say, oh, well, that's implausible, about things which, you know, really what they mean is, well, that doesn't happen very often. I mean, an absurd example of this is my first crime novel, Little Face, which is about a woman who claims her baby's been swapped for another baby. When I went to do an event just after the book had been published, a woman in the audience said to me, you know, I really loved it, but I did find one aspect of it quite implausible. And I said, yes, what was that? She said, well, the heroine drives a car a couple of weeks after having a caesarean. And when I had my caesarean, I couldn't have got in a car for at least, 4 months. And I said, right, okay, well, when I had my caesarean, I was driving 2 days later because I thought, it'll be fine. So I gave this paper about implausibility. And in order to prove that almost everything is plausible, you know, if something is physically, scientifically possible, then some lunatic will do it at some point, you know. And in order to prove this, I tried to think of the weirdest motive for committing murder that I possibly could. I thought, you know, what would be a really unusual, eccentric motive that only one person would ever have? And I will use that as my case study. And then I thought, well, I'm an eccentric individual. What motive would I have? If I were going to commit murder, why would I do it? And immediately, almost as though I was just waiting for a reason to commit murder, this motive popped up in my mind, and that became the motive in Kind of Cruel. Those of you who have read it and got to the end will remember what that motive is. And at the time, I was in a situation where I saw something coming down the line several years in the future, and I thought, yeah, if I were the kind of person who were willing to commit murder, which I'm not, I should point out, that might be something worth avoiding, and I could commit a couple of murders and easily make sure it didn't happen. So that was, then I had my solution idea. But I didn't at that point have a story to attach it to. And as always happens with my books, other things just seem to arrive in a almost by magic kind of way. And then you add those things on and somehow you cobble a story together. So in the case of Kind of Cruel, the other things, one of the most important elements, you know, I'm just going to move this lectern or stand away from it because I feel like David Cameron. I'm about to tell you why you should vote for me. One of the important elements in the book is the idea of inheriting someone else's children. And that occurred to me because it almost happened to me in a very peculiar way. I was at a literary party and everyone was standing around drinking glasses of wine, and there was a woman there who I would say I knew her reasonably well, but not massively well. We were friendly acquaintances rather than friends. So we said, hello, how are you? Caught up with news. And then she said, actually, I need to have a word with you about something. So can we go and stand over there in the corner? And I thought, this is odd. We don't really have a standing over there in the corner together kind of friendship. But I said, okay. She said, and actually, just you go to the corner, and I need to get my husband as well. I thought, yikes, this sounds not promising. What's going on here? So she finds her husband. And together they say to me, right, we've decided that it's about time we sorted out our wills, and we need to think about who we would leave our children to in the event of both of our deaths. And, you know, one of us hasn't got any family at all, and the other one has got a big family, but they're all really unsuitable in one way or another. So to cut a long story short, we've decided that there's nobody we would rather entrust our sprogs to than you. And, you know, feel free to say no, of course, but, you know, would you be at all willing to be their guardian in the event of our death? And I was like, what? I mean, you know, I've never even met these children. I've sort of seen them run past the hall a couple of times, but I didn't know the kids. In fact, I remember thinking, I'm not even sure what their names are. So this seemed very odd, but I have this real kind of affliction, basically, which is I hate socially awkward situations. I don't mind what's going on as long as it's not socially awkward. So, you know, if somebody comes up to me, as they occasionally do at my events, and say, you know, I hope you don't mind me saying, you know, you seem like a lovely person, but I've read all of your books and I hate them all, and, you know, I really think they're the worst crime novels ever. I immediately will think, oh no, this person's worried about how I'm going to react. I'd better make everything okay immediately. So I will then go, oh, that's absolutely fine, don't worry about it at all, please, you know, everything's fine. And I'm just a natural smoother over. Virtually anything could happen and I would try and smooth it over. And I just thought, I cannot possibly say to these people, no, I won't have your children. So I thought, well, what's the alternative? I have to say yes. I said, okay, marvellous, nothing could give me greater pleasure. And they said, cheers, and sort of toddled off. And then I thought, what do I do now? I've agreed to have these children. I don't want these children. But then I thought, okay, don't panic, it'll never happen. You know, how often is it that both parents get wiped out? As long as they don't go on holiday together on the same aeroplanes without their children, I'll be fine. And what are the odds of that happening? So I managed to sort of put it to the back of my mind. And then a few weeks later, I was having one of those nights when I just couldn't sleep because I was stressed about work. And I suddenly remembered that I'd agreed to inherit these children. And my husband was snoring next to me, and I looked at him and thought, he has no idea. I'd probably better tell him, because then I was more worried in that moment, more than I was worried about inheriting the children. I was worried about getting absolutely bollocked by my husband for not mentioning that I'd agreed to have these children. And I thought, well, this is no basis for a successful marriage, really. I mean, think how cross I'd be if he secretly agreed to inherit some other children, and if they all die at the same time and all the children arrive. So I woke him up, and I said, look, you know, this is nothing for us to worry about, and it'll never happen, but told him the story, and he went, what? You lunatic, why did you agree? You've got to ring them up first thing tomorrow and say there's no way we're having their children. I said, I can't do that, it'll be socially awkward. What about the next literary lunch? And he said, I don't care about social awkwardness, which is actually true. He really doesn't care about social awkwardness. Wherever we go as a couple, he creates social awkwardness and then I remove it. So I said, I just can't do that. He said, but seriously, you're willing to risk them dying and their kids turn up on our doorstep with their forlorn suitcases? I said, no, I'm not having their children, but by then they'd be dead. So I could just like not open the door and there'd be no social awkwardness at literary events, which is the main thing I want to avoid. Anyway, he forced me to ring up these people and say, I should have consulted my husband before agreeing to this, so it was all fine. But I thought it was kind of a fascinating situation, and it made me ask several of my friends whether they'd ever thought about this issue, had any experience of it. And the funny thing was that almost everybody I asked, people my age, would roll their eyes and go, oh, yeah, God, if my friend Rob and his wife die, we're getting their revolting brats who we loathe. And so it seemed that, you know, actually I was worrying more than most people do. Most people eagerly sign up to inherit children they can't stand, and they just hope for the best and assume it won't happen, and it never does. So I was probably making a fuss about nothing, but I thought it was an interesting thing. And so that's really what gave me the idea of Amber taking on the children of her dead best friend. The hypnotherapy aspect of the book. When I first started writing crime novels, I sort of thought of whatever story it was that I wanted to tell, and then I did the necessary research. And sometimes it was fun. You know, for example, for my second crime novel, Hurting Distance, the heroine is a sundial maker. And so that was quite enjoyable. I got to spend a couple of days in a sundial maker's studio, you know, reading brochures of sundial mottos, and you know, it's quite nice to hang around where beautiful sundials are being made, so that was fun. But when I came to write my fifth crime novel, which was a sort of fictionalised version of stories like Sally Clark and Angela Canning's, women who'd been accused of murdering their children and convicted of murdering their children, and they claimed it was cot death. And I mean, you've probably heard about the cases in the news. There was a paediatrician called Sir Roy Meadow who testified against all these women and basically said, for one family to lose 2 or 3 babies for no apparent medical reason is very suspicious and is probably murder. And then later on, after the women had gone to prison, somebody else said, hang on a minute, it might not be murder if that family has some kind of pre-existing medical condition, and then all the women appealed and were released. And I became very interested in writing a book loosely based on those cases. And that meant that I had to do nearly 2 years of very distressing research into controversial cot death murder cases. And I'm glad I did it, because the book, I think it's an important issue actually. The whole sort of the way at first the women were really demonised and witch hunted, and then the minute everyone changed their mind about the validity of the statistics, then suddenly the women were the aggrieved parties and the doctors were demonised and witch hunted. And so I was really pleased I wrote the book, but I did think to myself, is there any way I can make my research more fun? Maybe I can decide in advance that I'll write a book that will involve fun research. So my 6th crime novel, the one after the cot death one, which is called Lasting Damage, is about a woman who sees a dead body on a property website in the photographs of a house for sale. And the research for that was huge fun. I just looked on Rightmove and other property websites and spent a year staring at strangers' kitchen islands and going, oh, I like that veneer and things like that. And so, for Kind of Cruel, I realised that one thing I'd always wanted to do was try hypnotherapy. So I thought, well, if I knew that I wanted Amber to say these words under hypnosis, to not know where the words had come from. And I thought, well, I can't write that unless I've had some hypnosis myself. And I was curious to see whether it would work on me. My mind is kind of quite opinionated and won't shut up very easily. And I thought I'd like to meet the hypnotherapist that can get me to go into a trance. I'll probably just lie there with my eyes closed, thinking I know better than her, which was pretty much what happened. But I also like to try weird kinds of therapy. All the things that people like Richard Dawkins say, this is nonsense and no one should waste their money on it, I'm the person who wastes money on all those things. So, I've done homeopathy, acupuncture, reflexology, sacred clown therapy. The madder it sounds, the more I want to do it. Just to see what it is, apart from anything else. But I've never had hypnotherapy. So I found a local hypnotherapist, went to see her. I said, look, I'm a writer. I'm writing a book where somebody has to have hypnotherapy. And so I want to try it. So could you please hypnotise me? And since you'll need something to hypnotise me about, so I might as well get some benefit from it as well, why don't you try and hypnotise me into eating less? And then I can lose some weight. And she sort of narrowed her eyes at me and said, so are you saying you eat too much? I said, yeah, that's why I want you to hypnotise me to eat less. She said, and why do you think you do eat too much? I said, well, because food's nice, and, I've got no willpower, and I'm a bit of a hedonist. And she said, hedonist. So you like pleasurable experiences, do you? I said, well, yes, I didn't think that was a controversial position. Don't most people like pleasurable experiences? She said, not as much as you do. I said, right, well, actually, that's probably true, because I do notice that certain people I'm acquainted with will occasionally say, no, I won't have that pleasurable experience because either calories or morality, or whereas I never say that. I sort of go, yeah, I'll go for the pleasurable experience, and I can live with being a bad person. And she said, could it be that there's some dark, painful memory that you're repressing from the past? And I said, well, I don't think so, because I can remember, I've got a very good memory, and my memories of my past are in fact full of dark, painful things. So I can't see why I'd just forget one when I remember all the others. And she said, well, that's a trick that our memory plays on us all the time. We think we remember how dreadful our childhood was, or how miserable our marriage was, or whatever, but actually we've constructed false miserable memories, because the real miserable memories are so awful that we can't bear to go anywhere near them. And I said, by this point I was getting quite interested. I said, do you think I might have even worse memories than the ones I've got hidden away somewhere? She said, I'm absolutely convinced of it. She said, what we need to do is give you 15 sessions of psychoanalytic hypnotherapy, and I guarantee by session 11 or 12, a memory will come up, and that will be the memory. It will be the key to everything. It will explain your entire personality. So I was like, I can't wait, what could it be? This is really exciting, a cliffhanger. So I had these 15 sessions of hypnotherapy. Disappointingly, we never uncovered the memory. And in fact, we had more than 15 sessions. After about the 25th session, it was all very interesting, and it was great. I thought I needed one session for the book, but actually having 25 sessions made me even more of an expert in how hypnotherapists operate, and the hypnotherapist in Kind of Cruel is a key character. But by about session 20, I started saying to her, we were friends by this point, I said, it's not going to pop up, is it? If it hasn't popped up yet, it's not going to. And she said, yeah, I must admit, you are a particularly tough customer. You're really hanging on, your subconscious is really hanging on to that awful memory that will explain everything. And I said, well, I'm just so convinced that it doesn't exist. all the way through this process, I was thinking of new painful memories, and each time I'd go, oh, I've remembered a really bad one. Could it be this? No, it's definitely not that. Not that. Like, how do you know? You're telling me there is one. You don't know this isn't it, but you seem to claim that you do know. It was all very weird. So that was really interesting, and it made me sort of think that, you know, even though hypnotherapy didn't work on me in the conventional way, what was helpful for the book was that I knew right from the start, before I'd even seen the hypnotherapist, I didn't want to write a book in which hypnotherapy helps in a conventional way, because those books have been written before, and there's plenty of them. And one of the things I like to do in my writing is to take conventions of the crime genre, which have almost turned into cliches. Any of you who read a lot of crime will know, even probably without realising you know, but let's hypnotise you and we'll see if you do know. There's so many kind of tropes and familiar storylines that are just such a cliche in crime fiction. No one even questions them. Like, for example, the phone call from the person from the past. Hello, I'm someone from the past that you were hoping would never ring you again. And it's always that the person from the past has helped the person in the present to commit a murder 20 years ago. In fact, I'm dying to write a sort of parody story where the person from the past phones up and says hello in an ominous way. And the heroine goes, oh, hi! Remember that murder we committed? I was just telling my husband about it 5 minutes ago. You must come around so we can reminisce. So I knew that I didn't want Amber to go to a hypnotherapist with one missing memory and then have that memory restored by hypnotherapy. What I wanted to happen was I wanted Amber to go to a hypnotherapist and basically find it not helpful and find it annoying and point out all the things wrong with hypnotherapy, and then come to realise whatever it is that she needs to realise some other way. And my experience with a hypnotherapist was great for that, because although I never got to this mythical memory, which I still don't believe exists, what I did do was find out that my understanding of my life up to that point was not entirely accurate, and although I never felt I was in a trance or hypnotised, I was lying there with my eyes closed bitching about my family for an awfully long time. And that sort of meant that my mind was clearer than it was used to being, and new things popped up that I'd forgotten. And so by the end of that hypnotherapy, I had a different story about, you know, my life up to that point. So that was really interesting. And the book is, I think, dedicated to my hypnotherapist. So that was another, and now we're just friends. But she still says that I'm the worst patient she's ever had, because she, as a therapist, is trying to sort of analyse things. But I, as a crime writer and general nosy person, was also trying to analyse things. I want to be the one who provides the solution, and so did she. And that was a real problem, because I'd be lying there saying, you know, traumatic thing, and then I'd sit up and go, I know what it means, I know what it means. And she'd be like, I was just going to say, I know what it means. So that was quite interesting. So then the third element of the inspiration for the book was to do with the family that goes missing at Christmas time. For those of you who haven't read it, one of the sort of subsidiary mysteries in the book has to do with Amber's extended family, who hire a big house that can accommodate the whole extended family for Christmas. And just before Christmas Day, one branch of the family, Amber's sister and brother-in-law and their 2 children, go missing. Everyone's very worried because the Christmas presents are still there. The boys' Christmas presents are still there under the tree. There's no note or anything, and Amber and everyone just knows that they wouldn't just disappear unless something terrible had happened, without letting anyone know, without taking Christmas presents or opening them or anything like that. But just at the point when the police could reasonably be called because they've been missing long enough, they reappear, looking slightly traumatised, And they gather everyone together in the living room, and just when everyone's expecting to be given an explanation, all they get is, we're terribly sorry we disappeared, don't ask us any questions about it, everything's fine now, let's resume our Christmas celebrations. So I was really pleased with that as a plot device when I first thought of it, because actually people go missing in crime fiction all the time. That's another standard strand of the sort of stereotypical crime story. And normally when someone goes missing, one of two things happen. Either they turn up dead in a skip somewhere, or you never find them. Or they come back, but it's something, there's some reason. They've been, held in a basement by a lunatic and then they're released just in time for the last chapter. But I really love the idea of someone disappearing, reappearing almost immediately and saying, sorry, not telling. Because actually that is more frustrating. More frustrating than being desperate to find out something and not know what it is being desperate to find out something, not know what it is, and know that that person there totally knows what it is, but won't tell you. I mean, you've probably all been in situations, especially like at school, when somebody says, I've got this really amazing secret, but I can't tell you what it is. And most people in that situation kind of find it a bit frustrating. I find it unbearable, the idea that there is a secret in the same room as me, and I'm not getting told that secret. It almost makes me want to jump out of a window. So that's why that was in. But the reason why that occurred to me, that whole idea of disappearing at Christmas, having congregated the whole family together, was because for a long time, in fact until about 3 years ago, my house was the house where everyone went for Christmas. So me, my husband and our kids and all of his family and all of my family, plus husbands, wives, children, would all congregate at my house. And I became very resentful of this because when my kids were younger, they woke up ridiculously early, and I would have to get up with them at sort of 6 a.m. and watch The Who's and Peppa Pig and all those bleak, dispiriting programmes. Meanwhile, all my house guests were having a lovely lie-in, and they would all sort of turn up at about 11 a.m. going, oh, what a great night's sleep. It's so relaxing being here. And I waited year after year for any one of the 27 visiting adults to say, would you like to have a lie-in one morning? I will happily get up with the kids. Just once, not every morning, just once. And it never happened. And so year after year I was becoming more and more resentful of these people. And one Christmas Eve it all came to a head. I got into bed and I couldn't lie down. I was stuck in an angry right angle of resentment. And I woke my husband up and I said, I just can't bear this any longer. He said, what? Everything's fine. I was asleep. I said, I hate everybody. He said, what, everybody? I said, well, no, not everybody in the world, but everyone that we're related to and who we have to spend Christmas with tomorrow. And he said, oh, yeah, well, yeah, I've hated them all for years, but what can you do? I said, well, I've got an idea, actually, of what we can do. I can't bear to spend Christmas with the selfish, ungrateful gits. Let's disappear. Let's get the kids quietly, put them in the car. It'd be like that bit where, the nuns help the Von Trapps escape from the Nazis. And we, creep downstairs, get in the car, and we just go somewhere to a nice hotel where we'll have Christmas dinner there. And then all the guests that we've invited to stay for Christmas will wake up on Christmas morning, where are we? They won't have any idea. No one will be there to cook their Christmas dinner. Oh dear, poor old them. It just seemed like such a great plan. My husband said, yeah, we can't do that. He said, if we were staying with someone else in their house, then maybe we could disappear. But this is our house. We've invited everyone. I said, yeah. I said, you're clearly not a novelist, are you? That's what's so great about it. Disappearing from someone else's house is par for the course. But inviting everybody to your house and then disappearing, that's better from a sort of narrative point of view. And he said, yeah, I'm not doing that. We'd have to come back, wouldn't we? I'm not leaving my house forever. And when we came back, what would we say? Now that did present a bit of a problem, as well as giving me the idea about somebody coming back and refusing to explain. I said to him, well, we'll just do that thing that secretive private people do. You know, when you really want to know what they've been up to, and they do that whole, oh, I'm sorry, it was very good, I couldn't possibly, you know, that sort of face, that sort of don't ask me any more questions because it's very upsetting for me face. Which I never do. You know, if someone wants to know something about me, I'm sort of like, right, let me tell you all the gossip. But I thought I could probably do that face. And that was totally where that side of the idea came from. I didn't get to do it in real life. My husband put his foot down and refused to drive us all out of there. So we did do the whole Christmas Day thing. Although on Boxing Day, I gathered everyone together for a family meeting. And I said, right, I've drawn up a rota of who's getting up with my children on what mornings. I've divided you all into pairs, and I basically assigned everyone a day that they were getting up with my kids so that I could have lions for the rest of the Christmas holiday. So that was the more prosaic way that I actually dealt with the situation in real life. But yeah, so with every book that I write, that is what happens. Little incidents happen in real life, and I just either add to them or change them slightly to make it, you know, a crime story. What else can I tell you about Kind of Cruel? Oh yeah, the title. I had that title long before I had any ideas for the plot. Somebody said it in conversation, and I thought, oh, that's actually, although it's quite a, you know, in some ways quite a boring phrase, it's quite a neat phrase, kind of cruel, because kind and cruel are opposites. And you might expect a book to be called Cruel to be Kind, but kind of cruel, you know, no, I don't know whether anyone's ever used that for anything, but it just seemed like a neat sort of opposition. And I didn't know what the words would mean, and then I thought, well, what if the heroine doesn't know what the words mean? What if she knows the words matter, but doesn't know what they mean? And that was where I got the idea of Amber saying the words under hypnosis while having no idea what their significance is. I think that part might have been inspired by a very, very old Enid Blyton book that I read when I was a kid. I can't remember which one it is, but it was a Secret Seven book. And one of the kids finds a piece of paper, and it says something like, it says Emma Lane, and either they think it's a person and it turns out to be a road called Emma Lane, or the other way round. And I can remember when I was about 5 or 6 reading that thinking, oh wow, it could be either a person or a road because of the name Lane. That's so clever. And I just like, you know, ever since then I've had a thing about stories where there's some fragment of text or there's some words and you don't quite know what they mean, and then it turns out to be something very different from what you expected. So that was where that came from. And you know, there's a subplot involved. Somebody's alibi involves going on a driving training course, having got a speeding ticket, you know, and they're offered, you know, instead of the points on their license, they go on a course. That happened to me. And I thought, great, I'm going to use this boring day on the driving course, you know, as part of the book. So while everyone else was sort of answering their questions about what you should do if a lorry goes past you at 40 miles an hour, I was saying to the instructor guy things like, would you know if I wasn't me? And he was like, supposed to be talking about parallel parking now. Yeah, but how would you know if someone was impersonating? And everyone was going, who is this woman? Okay, right, I'll stop wittering on. I'm happy to answer any questions, not just about this book, but about anything really, topical issues, or if anyone wants to ask about, probably some of you know that I've written a Poirot novel, a sort of Agatha Christie continuation novel, so I'm happy to talk about that, but tell me what you would like me to talk about.
I'd like to ask you a question. Okay. Are you still married?
Am I still married? I am.
And your
yes.
husband is still putting up with you.
Waking him up. He is. Well,
waking
no.
up and out of his sleep and
yeah. No, he's not putting up with that. He,
no.
you know, at a certain point, he did make it known that he didn't want to be woken up. You know, for my random dramas. But yes, no, in a more general sense, he is still.
You're a very lucky woman.
I think actually, most marriages that work because you kind of have an equal amount to put up with from each other. So he puts up with my craziness, I put up with his craziness, and it sort of balances it out. And I think people probably tend to veer towards partners who are as annoying to live with as them. Just in the way that people veer towards partners that are as attractive as them. It's very rare that you see a couple and you think, no way would that person be with that person. Most people instinctively go to their own league, and I think most people go to their own league of irritableness to live with. My husband is incredibly irritating in some ways. You know, he'll walk into the room and he'll say, "Where are my glasses?" Or "Where's my wallet?" I'll say, "Okay, let's try and think, you know, when did you last have those?" "I don't know." "Right, okay, well, which room did you just come from?" "I don't know. All I know is I'm here now and I have no glasses." You know, he's just got no ability to sort of reason back to where he was before.
I'd like to know, for yourself, do you read crime yourself? And if so, what writers do you like?
I do read crime. In fact, I read almost nothing but crime because I'm really addicted to mysteries, basically. I love that feeling of I can't work out what's going on and I'm desperate to find out. My favourite sort of historical crime writer is Agatha Christie. She's sort of my all-time favourite. My favourite contemporary crime writer is Tana French. And then I read all kinds of people. I like to read one book each by every crime writer. So because I'm a bit of a sort of geeky anorak type about crime fiction, I like to feel I've read one of everybody's books.
So who do you absolutely hate then?
As a writer?
Yeah.
There's not very many that I really hate, but I guess I'm not so interested. I like crime fiction that's really different in some way. So Tana French, have any of you read Tana French? Yeah. Her books, I think, are just so unusual for crime novels. She builds a whole sort of fictional universe that is absolutely vivid. You just have no doubt that those people are real, and it's, you know, it's, in a way, she's kind of quite literary. She doesn't just do the crime stuff. When you finish one of her books, it really stays with you. The ones I'm less keen on are the kind of, you know, DCI so-and-so is in bed, gets a phone call, we've got another body, gov. Goes and looks at the body. "Oh, I'm strangely obsessed with this serial killer, I'd better drink lots of whiskey and endanger my marriage." You know, they're kind of really cliche ones. I like ones that are different. I love Gillian Flynn, Gone Girl and her other two. I love a crime writer called Belinda Bauer, her most famous book is probably Rubbernecker, which actually I haven't read, but I've read two of hers which are brilliant. I was a huge fan of Ruth Rendell for a long time. I think her early and middle periods were really, really brilliant, but her latest few have not been quite so good. Yes.
How do you discipline your creativity to actually get the book? Because you sound like there's so much going on. How do you get it condensed to get the novel? I know it's sort of hard question.
It's quite weird because I'm not really aware of doing that. So I have all these different sort of points of inspiration. I have my beginning and my end. So I don't start writing until I've got the sort of plot hook and the solution. And then it just sort of starts filling in. You know, suddenly I find that whereas the day before I had no idea how to get from point A to point B, suddenly I know a few points along the way. So a lot of that happens just almost subconsciously, but I'm quite an organisation freak. I like arranging things in an orderly way, so I do a lot of plot arranging. You know, this clue has to go there, this person has to make this remark in chapter 4, and then in chapter 7 it will emerge that it was meant in a totally different way from how the reader thought. So all of that sort of nitty-gritty plot architecture I love. And I know a lot of crime writers hate it. A lot of my friends who are